The rain poured heavily as I stood outside the grand mansion, my clothes drenched and my hands clenched into fists. The golden lights inside illuminated a world I once longed to be a part of, a world my best friend Olivia had belonged to effortlessly. A year ago, she had humiliated me in front of her wealthy friends, laughing as they mocked my thrift store dress and budget meal at the restaurant. I had walked away that day, vowing never to let anyone make me feel small again. Now the tables had turned. Olivia was the one who needed help, and I was the only person who could give it to her. A year ago, I believed Olivia and I would be best friends forever. We had grown up together, sitting side by side in school, sharing secrets and dreaming about our futures. But there was always one difference between us: money. Olivia came from a world of wealth and luxury. Her family lived in a grand estate with a private tennis court, an indoor swimming pool, and more rooms than she could count. Expensive cars lined the driveway, and servants catered to her every need. I, on the other hand, lived in a small apartment with my mother, who worked 2 jobs to make sure we had food on the table. My clothes were secondhand, my shoes were always a little worn out, and I never had the latest gadgets or designer handbags like Olivia did. But Olivia had always assured me that none of it mattered. "You are my best friend, Brianna," she would say, flipping her perfectly styled blonde hair. "Money does not change that." I had believed her, until the day everything changed. It was Olivia's 17th birthday, and she had invited me to an exclusive restaurant to celebrate with her rich friends. I had saved up for weeks to buy a decent dress. Nothing fancy, but at least something new. I had even done my own hair and makeup, determined to fit in just for one night. But from the moment I arrived, I knew I did not belong. The other girls wore designer dresses, their jewelry sparkling under the restaurant's chandelier lighting. They spoke about their summer trips to Europe, their expensive cars, and their plans to attend Ivy League universities. I stayed quiet, sipping my water and trying not to draw attention to myself. Then the waiter arrived with the menus. As I glanced at the prices, my stomach sank. Everything was outrageously expensive. Even the cheapest item on the menu cost more than what my mother made in an entire day. I swallowed hard. "I think I will just have a salad." One of Olivia's friends, a tall girl named Lila, smirked. "A salad? Are you on a diet or just broke?" The table erupted into laughter. My cheeks burned, but I forced a smile. "I am just not that hungry." Olivia, instead of defending me, laughed along with them. "Oh, come on, Brianna," she said, grinning. "Let us be real. We all know you cannot afford anything here." The laughter grew louder. My heart pounded. I had never felt so humiliated in my life. I looked at Olivia, hoping she would realize how hurtful her words were. But she only shrugged, sipping her expensive drink, as if my feelings did not matter. That was the moment I knew. She was never really my friend. I stood up, my hands trembling. "You know what, Olivia? You can keep your rich friends and your fancy restaurants. I do not need this." Then I walked out. That night, I promised myself that I would never let anyone make me feel that small again. I worked harder than ever before. I took extra shifts at the local cafe, saved every penny, and focused on my studies. I applied for scholarships and internships, determined to build a better future for myself. A year later, my life had completely changed. I had won a prestigious scholarship to study business at a top university. I had also started a small online business that had grown beyond my expectations. Through hard work and determination, I was now on a path to success, without anyone's pity or charity. Meanwhile, Olivia's world had fallen apart. Her father had been arrested for financial fraud, and their family had lost everything. Their mansion was seized, their cars repossessed, and their accounts frozen. Olivia, who had once lived in luxury, now faced the harsh reality of life without wealth. And that was how she ended up standing outside my tiny office one evening, looking desperate and ashamed. "Brianna," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I need your help." I stared at Olivia, struggling to process the moment. The girl who had once humiliated me for being poor was now standing in front of me, looking nothing like the confident, privileged person I had once known. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple, worn-out jeans and a plain shirt. Her long, perfectly styled hair was now tied back in a messy ponytail, and her eyes, once filled with arrogance, were now full of desperation. A part of me wanted to turn her away, to remind her of how she had treated me when I was the one struggling. But another part of me, the one that remembered our years of friendship before money had driven a wedge between us, could not ignore the pain in her voice. I crossed my arms. "You need my help?" I repeated, my voice calm but firm. "That is interesting. Considering the last time we spoke, you were laughing at me in front of your rich friends." She winced, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I know I was awful to you, Brianna," she admitted. "I was a terrible friend. Her voice broke slightly, and she took a deep breath. "I do not have anyone else to turn to." I sighed, gesturing for her to come inside. I led her to a small seating area in my office, where she sat down hesitantly. "So," I said, sitting across from her, "tell me what happened." She hesitated, fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. "My father. He was involved in some illegal business deals. The authorities found out, and everything fell apart overnight. Our bank accounts were frozen, our house was taken, and my parents are facing legal charges. I have nothing left, Brianna." I watched her carefully. This was a girl who had never known hardship. She had never worried about paying rent, affording food, or working for survival. Now she was facing a reality I had lived with my entire life. "What about your rich friends?" I asked. "The ones who laughed at me with you? Did they not help you?" She let out a bitter laugh. "They disappeared the moment I lost my money. They do not even answer my calls anymore." I nodded, unsurprised. I had always known that the people Olivia surrounded herself with cared more about wealth than friendship. She was only realizing it now. She looked at me with pleading eyes. "I need a job, Brianna. I need to learn how to survive in the real world. And you built something from nothing. I have been watching your journey online. I know you have a business. Please, will you help me?" I leaned back in my chair, studying her. A year ago, she would never have imagined asking me for help. Now she was sitting in my office, desperate for a chance to start over. A part of me wanted revenge. I wanted to turn her away, just as she had once looked down on me. But deep inside, I knew that was not who I was. I took a deep breath. "I will not just give you a job, Olivia. If you want my help, you will have to earn it." She nodded quickly. "I will do anything." I stood up, walking over to my desk. "Then you start tomorrow. But understand this, there are no shortcuts here. You will work just like everyone else. No special treatment." She swallowed hard. "I understand." As she left my office that evening, I could not help but wonder, was Olivia truly ready to change? Or was she just desperate enough to pretend? The next morning, Olivia arrived at my office right on time. She looked nervous but determined. Gone was the girl who used to walk with effortless confidence, her designer heels clicking against marble floors. Now she was quiet, uncertain, and for the first time in her life, stepping into a world where her last name carried no power. I handed her a uniform, a simple black shirt with my company's logo, and a pair of jeans. She stared at it for a moment before looking at me. "This is for," she hesitated, "a basic employee position?" "Yes," I said firmly. "You wanted to learn how to survive. That starts with hard work. You will be an entry-level assistant. You will run errands, handle customers, and do everything the other employees do." Her lips parted as if she wanted to protest. But then she shut her mouth, nodded, and took the uniform. She disappeared into the restroom to change, and when she returned, she looked ordinary. Just another employee in the office. The transformation was jarring, but I did not comment on it. Instead, I handed her a notepad. "You will start with shadowing me today. Pay attention, take notes, and do not ask questions unless I say so." She nodded, clutching the notepad tightly, as if it were her last lifeline. The day started with small tasks, sorting through emails, organizing files, and taking notes during meetings. Olivia struggled at first, fumbling with basic office work that I had mastered years ago. She was not used to responsibilities. She had never had to answer to anyone before. At one point, she accidentally printed 50 copies of a document instead of 5. When I handed her the stack and told her to recycle the extra papers, she sighed heavily, but did as she was told. By lunchtime, she was exhausted. She collapsed into a chair in the break room, wiping her forehead. I had no idea work could be this draining, she muttered. I raised an eyebrow. You have been sitting at a desk for most of the morning, Olivia. The real work has not even started. She let out a weak laugh. I guess I never realized how much effort goes into running a business. I gave her a moment to catch her breath, before setting down a stack of papers in front of her. Your next task is learning how to manage finances. Since you grew up around wealth, you should have a basic understanding of budgeting, right? She hesitated. Well, my father always handled money. I never really paid attention to it. I sighed. Then it is time you learn. For the next few days, Olivia worked harder than I had ever seen her work before. At first, she made mistakes constantly, forgetting to save documents, misfiling reports, and even spilling coffee on an important contract. But she never gave up. She showed up early, stayed late, and asked questions. One of my senior employees, Daniel, approached me on the third day. She is trying, he admitted. She is not very good at it yet, but she is putting in the effort. I nodded. That is what matters. But I still watched Olivia carefully. Was this just desperation? Or was she truly changing? On Friday, I decided to test her. I called her into my office and placed 2 envelopes on the desk. One of these contains your paycheck for the week, I explained. The other contains a list of local charities that help people in financial trouble. You can take whichever one you want. Her eyes widened. You mean, you would pay me even if I did not take the paycheck? I nodded. Yes, but the choice is yours. She bit her lip, looking between the 2 envelopes. The old Olivia, the one who never worried about money, would have scoffed at the idea of charity. But this Olivia? She hesitated. Finally, she picked up the envelope with her paycheck. I need to survive, she said softly. But I want to help too. Once I get back on my feet, I will find a way to give back. I watched her for a long moment, then nodded. Good answer. That evening, as we were closing the office, she turned to me. Brianna, she said quietly. Can I ask you something? I nodded. Go ahead. She hesitated, then said, why are you helping me? After everything I did to you, you could have turned me away. I sighed, crossing my arms. Because I know what it feels like to have nothing. And because I wanted to see if you were capable of real change. She swallowed hard. And have I changed? I studied her carefully. The spoiled, entitled girl I once knew was gone. In her place was someone who had been broken, but was trying to rebuild herself. You are getting there, I said honestly. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. Thank you, Brianna, for giving me a second chance. For the first time in a long time, I believed her. Over the next few months, Olivia continued working at my company. She was no longer just an outsider struggling to fit in. She had become a part of the team. The employees who had initially viewed her with suspicion now accepted her as one of their own. She still made mistakes, but she owned up to them. And that, more than anything, showed her growth. One day, I walked into the office early and found Olivia already there. She was sitting at her desk, typing furiously, her brows furrowed in concentration. You are here early, I remarked. She looked up, startled, then smiled sheepishly. I have been working on the budget reports. I noticed that we could cut some unnecessary expenses and reallocate funds to improve efficiency. I raised an eyebrow, impressed. You figured that out on your own? She nodded. I have been learning from the finance team. I know I used to be careless with money, but I want to do better. I took the report from her and skimmed through it. Her suggestions were solid, well-researched, and practical. Good work, I said, handing it back to her. I will review it in detail later, but this looks promising. She beamed, and for the first time, I saw a different kind of confidence in her. One that was not based on wealth or status, but on actual effort and skill. As the weeks went by, Olivia's transformation became undeniable. She was no longer the girl who had once humiliated me for being poor. She was now someone who understood struggle, who had learned humility, and who worked hard to prove herself. One afternoon, as we were wrapping up for the day, she approached me hesitantly. Brianna, she said, I have been thinking. I do not want to just work for you forever. I folded my arms. What do you mean? She took a deep breath. I want to start something of my own. Maybe a nonprofit organization that helps young people from struggling backgrounds learn financial literacy and business skills. I stared at her surprised. That is unexpected. She smiled. I used to believe that money was everything. But now I see that knowledge and resilience matter just as much. If I had known what I know now, maybe I could have done something before my family lost everything. I want to help others avoid the mistakes I made. I nodded slowly. That is a noble goal, Olivia. She hesitated, then asked, would you be willing to mentor me? I considered it for a moment. A year ago, the idea of working alongside Olivia in any capacity would have been laughable. But now looking at her, I saw someone who had truly changed. I smiled. I would be honored. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were tears of gratitude, not desperation. A year ago, Olivia had humiliated me for being poor. Now she was standing beside me, not as an enemy but as a friend. Life had a strange way of turning things around, and as I watched her grow into a better version of herself, I realized something important. Revenge was never as satisfying as redemption, and Olivia had finally found hers. A full year had passed since Olivia first walked into my office, desperate and broken. Looking back, it was hard to believe how much had changed. She was no longer the spoiled girl who had mocked me for being poor. She was no longer the person who relied on her family's wealth to navigate life. Instead, she had become someone who understood struggle, someone who valued hard work, and someone who wanted to give back. Her nonprofit organization, Rise Again, had officially launched 6 months ago. At first, it was just a small initiative, offering free financial literacy classes for young adults who had grown up in privileged but unprepared environments, much like Olivia had. But soon it expanded. She partnered with schools, community centers, and even businesses that were willing to sponsor students who showed potential but lacked resources. I watched her work tirelessly, pouring her heart and soul into the project. It was ironic, really. The same girl who once looked down on people like me was now dedicating her life to helping those who had once been in my shoes. One evening, I was closing up the office when Olivia stopped by. She had just come from a speaking event, and she looked exhausted but happy. I did it, she said, flopping into a chair. Our first group of students completed the program today. One of them even got a job offer at a finance firm. I smiled. That is incredible, Olivia. You should be proud. She leaned back, exhaling. I never thought I would end up here. If you had told me 2 years ago that I would be running a nonprofit, I would have laughed. I chuckled. Honestly, so would I. She laughed too, shaking her head. I deserved that. A moment of silence passed between us before she spoke again, her voice softer this time. Brianna, I need to say something. She looked me in the eye, sincerity written all over her face. I am sorry, truly sorry, for everything. For humiliating you, for being cruel, for thinking I was better than you just because I had money. I was awful to you, and I do not expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know that I regret it every single day. I studied her carefully. The old me, the one who had suffered under Olivia's cruel words, would have wanted revenge, would have wanted her to suffer the way I had suffered. But I had already won in ways that truly mattered. I had built something for myself. I had overcome. And now Olivia was not my enemy. She was my friend. I forgave you a long time ago, Olivia, I said. And I am proud of who you have become. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were not tears of guilt or desperation. They were tears of gratitude. Life had come full circle. A week later, Olivia invited me to a charity gala she was hosting. It was a grand event, filled with influential people, business owners, and young individuals benefiting from her program. As I stood in the crowd, listening to Olivia give her speech, I realized how much she had changed. She no longer spoke with arrogance. Instead, she spoke with purpose, with passion, with an understanding of what truly mattered in life. At the end of the night, she found me. I have been thinking, she said. What if we expand Rise Again? We could work together, combine your business skills with my nonprofit goals. I raised an eyebrow. You want us to be partners? She nodded. Yes, but only if you trust me. I smiled. I do. As we shook hands, I realized something important. People could change. Olivia had proven that. And in the end, it was not about wealth, or revenge, or who had the upper hand. It was about growth, about second chances, and about becoming better than who we once were. And as I looked around the room, filled with people whose lives were being changed for the better, I knew we were exactly where we were meant to be.